Hey, Dr. Anderson. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm excited to talk with you.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to discussing current events with you, getting your feel for the political environment, and of course, getting to know you and who you are
Yeah,
and what work you're doing. It seems like you're doing very interesting, probably important work. And
I hope
so-
both.
yeah,
Interesting and important. Yeah, I hope so.
so let's get to know you a little bit. Easy question. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of philosophy and religious studies at Arizona State University, where I've been for 25 years. And over the last 5+ years, I've been speaking up as a public intellectual because I'm a conservative and I'm a Christian. And those are extremely rare
Hmm.
statistically at our universities, especially in subjects that are in the humanities, like philosophy, religion,
Hmm.
history, literature. It's almost non-existent. I'm in that sense, I'm interesting just because I'm almost like
Hmm.
a endangered species about to
Yeah,
go
you're
out
a
of existence.
microscopic subculture within a
Yeah.
subculture that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, right. So, but since I dated to about 2018, I noticed our universities, because ASU is a state university, it's not a religious university. It's the largest university in the country right now, 190,000 students. And I noticed a shift from multiculturalism, which was what I went to college under in the 90s and early odds. And that just says that, hey, we got to learn about every single culture. They're all equal. We're not going to pass any judgments. Around 2018-ish, there was a shift to the left, the professors just drilling hardcore to the net. They're gonna just admit, hey, we don't like Christians, we don't like conservatives. You got to be a leftist. So George Floyd, BLM, all the things that we've learned now have been fraudulent. BLM and Ibram X Kendi, who started this anti-racism project, who ended up being a
Hmm.
fraud, taking
Hmm.
millions of dollars of grant money. So all of that has collapsed now. But the professors
Hmm.
haven't apologized. They haven't recanted. They used years and years of university state resources to push this agenda, which sometimes was even literally called anti-whiteness.
100%. Oh, I'm not shy about uh, calling it what it is. It really is that, and it's so
Mhm.
interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with my little narrative, but I grew up on the left, grew up in a progressive
Yeah.
home, always voted for Democrats. Uh, as an adult at 28 years old in 2018, got
Oh.
myself into law school. It was the greatest
Mhm.
thing, my greatest accomplishment without a
Mhm.
doubt.
Good for
University of
you.
San Diego. Thank you so much. And I loved it. Had such a great
Mhm.
time.
That's a great university too. Yep.
The first thing I noticed upon orientation was implicit bias training. This feels
Mhm.
different. Like, this is
Yep.
weird. I'm 28. You guys are just coming out of undergrad. This isn't how we did it. What is this all about? Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Uh, Lovely law school experience. And then I take these two critical race theory electives in my final year, which was 2022. And that was extremely formative for me and kicked off
Mhm.
this journey for me searching for political identity podcast, which led me to becoming a Trump voter in 24 and rebranding my podcast. So here we are,
Okay.
still trying to explore.
Well, that's the same thing. So we've had really similar experiences, and I love that because yeah, you saw firsthand what I saw, and I'm currently involved in a lawsuit against ASU. I'm represented by the Goldwater Institute, which is a national legal firm located here, but they basically run cases. You might know them since you're in law. They do
Mm,
cases against government overreach. So there's the Alliance Defending Freedom, which tends to always do First Amendment religious issues. Goldwater does government overreach. So they're representing me because in 2023, ASU had required training. It called it inclusive communities, which is okay. That's great. It's a state university. Yeah, we got to include everybody. No doubt about that. I'm first in line for that. I teach world religions. I teach every religion. So I'm not saying that the university should be a Christian university or a conservative university, but the actual
important point.
training, once I got into it, was about anti-whiteness, about decolonization, about how
Hmm.
Christian missionaries are spreading colonization,
Hmm.
and so I objected, and it's required training though, and everyone has to sit through it, and
Hmm.
so it actually violates Arizona and I believe now federal law because of the executive orders that Trump did last spring, but it violated existing Arizona law that state universities can't teach racism.
Right. Yeah, no, I certainly got a feeling that it was way beyond history, a critical view of history. even a black perspective or a this minority or that minority perspective, which is
Yeah.
super important
Yeah.
and
Right.
just like fantastic.
No one's
Like,
against that. Yep.
I mean, I took the damn classes for a reason, you know. I
Yeah.
wanted to see what this injustice movement was about. Social, and what I found was that it was anti-white, it was anti-American, and the perspective of religion is interesting because it's almost a parallel thing. The relationship between traditional American culture and religion is interesting. It's not completely straightforward, but for
Yeah.
those of us who see the connection, it makes perfect sense. But there are both things that seem to be intentionally being deconstructed
Yep.
by this movement. And the question is that too far? Is it way beyond just teaching history? And is it cultural Marxism, if you will? And I concluded that the answer is yes.
Oh
And I
yeah.
wasn't
Well, I mean, if
comfortable.
you read the Marxist manifesto, read the Communist Manifesto, you read Lenin, you read any sources like that. This is their strategy: is to get the people to begin to question their system, to say it is unjust. And for the Marxists that that wanted to take over the United States, well, that meant you also have to do that to Christianity. Christianity had a much weaker hold over the Russian mind than it does in America. And so the Russian Revolution went one way, whereas the American Revolution, they thought we would also become communists, pretty quickly after the Russians did, and we didn't. And so their strategy had to be, we've got to drive a wedge between the American mind and Christianity. And so you've just seen a perpetual bombardment and of Christianity as unjust, as racist, as tyrannical, as ruining everyone's fun. You got Stranger Things. Poor Will Byers is terrified to come out because Christians teach that homosexuality is immoral. And so just nonstop propaganda about Christianity with this larger goal in mind. And then you're right. You have projects about how the United States itself has always been structurally racist and therefore has to be dismantled and given over. So it goes from what you initially said and what I called multiculturalism. You pointed out, hey, there's different perspectives we want to hear. Yes. But then you find out, oh, they're still pushing their brand of racism, though, because what they teach is you can judge a person based on their skin color without ever meeting Owen Anderson. He's a racist on their view because of his skin color. Well, that's just racism. That's the definition of racism.
Yeah. And even if we want to be even more generous to the perspective, which may or may not be warranted, but to just give the benefit of the doubt, it's like the perspective is based on skin color. There is still work for the government to do for justice, whereas the multicultural, the liberal of the 90s, what we grew up in different perspectives, but is no, it's all good. The melting pot is great, and let's all have it, but one doesn't have to dominate and so on.
Yeah. Being colorblind. Bono, in the 90s is singing about being colorblind and how all the colors will bleed into one. And we thought, hey, that's great. And now we're told that's racism also. Yeah. Now here's
100%. Because ultimately the core thing is, this is the Ibram Kendi, the anti-racism thing. If you deny and this is truly the fundamental kernel of CRT, is that if you just accept living in a colorblind society, you are perpetuating the racism. You are and so it's like, therefore you have to remold the colorblind society. Well, that doesn't work for a lot of people.
Well, also, exactly. And also, when you look at, let's say it's true, you don't want to romanticize the 90s. They weren't the perfect decade. There was lots of problems. The LA riots was right at the beginning of the 90s. And so if you look at the problems that come up, for example, the ones that get brought by professors about inequality in outcomes, and you say, well, African Americans have these inequalities in outcomes, and we want to figure out how to make it look more like other groups. That's a fine question. Why is it like that? That's an interesting question. But what critical race theory does, and anti-racism, says certain answers aren't on the table. For example, you cannot bring up fatherlessness, even though every study shows fatherlessness is the key thing. If you fix that one thing, if men married the women they have babies with and raise those babies, statistics of crime and everything else go down. You're not allowed to bring that up because that's also white racism, even though that answers in other groups like Asians and Hispanics, that answers in other groups, you're not allowed. So if someone was genuinely interested in solving the problems, they'd want every option on the table. I mean, imagine a person who gets cancer. They
Hmm.
say, doctor, what can we do? I'll do anything. This is really bad. I'll fix it no matter what it is. Why isn't that the issue here? Why isn't that the response here then? Why are they saying the only answer is
Hmm.
a large government that enforces racial quotas?
And this is what I was trying to explain to my dad the other night. And this is what Matt Walsh explains so well on Tucker Carlson's recent. I've been listening to Tucker a little bit lately. I like Matt Walsh.
Mhm.
Obviously, saying you like someone doesn't mean you agree with
Sure.
everything, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, all that disclaimer. But I think Matt Walsh is very interesting, and Tucker does as well. And it was a great conversation about the kind of split on the right now. And to talk about that, what they had to do first, or what they wisely decided to do, was to define the left. And what this is what we're talking about, whether it's CRT, whether the
Mhm.
thing, the cultural moment that we're talking about is moral relativism, cultural
Yeah.
relativism, as opposed to truth and objective standards. And you can kind of
Yep.
play with that as you will, but that is the underlying starting point for
Yeah.
this left right divide. And
Yep.
to your point about certain things being off the table, part of the moral relativism versus objective reality grounded is e- everything's on the table. Just do the analysis and run it. And so
Yeah.
you don't want to intellectually stunt yourself.
Yeah, well, and yeah, exactly. And it was so that's where the moral relativism that comes out of the earlier multiculturalism, which really got its feet in the 90s. So again,
Mm,
kind of problematizing this idea the 90s was a perfect decade.
mm,
But you went from being able to say, no, there are actually some things about Western civilization that are superior, not because of skin color, because Western civilization isn't one skin color, but
hmm.
because individualism,
Yes.
individual rights, that you have a right that you have value that the government can't take from you. Rationality and public debate, things like that are more or better than their alternatives.
Hmm.
They're better than a society that treats everyone like a cog who can be replaced and killed by the government. That's not a good society.
Well, ask Mamdani, the warmth of
Yeah,
collectivism.
right. No, I know. Then so you've been seeing memes of Tiananmen Square with the warmth of
Mm,
collectivism, the tanks
mm,
rolling down on the cold individual who was run over. And so yeah, that's this idea of collectivism is we don't like the individual. The individual doesn't have any value. And it will always use a foil of a rugged individual who cares about nobody, like an Andrew Tate
hmm,
is their
hmm,
example, right?
hmm.
As if the classical capitalism is all Andrew Tate. It's not.
Right.
So I think the multiculturals of the 90s turned into, well, not only they're not all equal, actually, the oppressed are the better ones. So we go from just
Hmm.
after World War II, where we're allowed to say, hey, the West is the best. What are your other options? I mean, you might think of some more ideal, but in the real world, where does everyone want to live?
Hmm.
We go from there to oppressed. If you're oppressed, you're better than your oppressors.
Hmm.
And so that's the Marxist dialectic that
Hmm.
gets infused into the American university. So that even now, when we hear about like the Somalian fraud, guaranteed, if you look up any humanities professor, they're saying something along the lines of, yeah, but they're oppressed. The oppressed
Hmm.
people can't
Hmm.
actually steal. They're just taking
Hmm.
stolen money.
Right.
So that's not wrong. So what's horrible about this view is it actually dehumanizes the
Right.
supposed oppressed. They no longer have moral agency.
Exactly. When you erode individualism, you erode
Mhm.
accountability.
Yep. Yeah, and you treat them like they're just pushed around and shoved around and they don't have any moral free will, which is actually not ennobling, it's dehumanizing. And so
Yeah.
the very professor who thinks to himself or herself, I'm speaking highly of the Somalian, is actually insulting them by taking away their free will.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I assess MAGA as, a more bluntness, a less babying people.
Mhm.
Look, it's not that you want to be blind to or insensitive culturally, but
Mhm.
treat people like people. If you really believe that people are people, then treat people are people and like, hey, you came here legally, you get to stay. If you didn't, good
It's
luck.
yeah.
It's
Constant is what John Wick says, consequences.
mm,
Maybe it took a New Yorker to just be the blunt one. Maybe
right.
he represents a New York that won't exist anymore, but
Yeah.
a blunt and in your face statement.
Yeah.
And that's what we needed, someone to do
Right.
that because
Yeah. Well, my dad isn't buying it. So I tried to explain to him, look, like this is the dynamic, the culture war, and he's calling it old news. And you studied critical race theory in law school 4 years ago. It's over. And what about
Mhm.
healthcare? I said, and he got me. I'm like, I'm not really following the healthcare debate, shamefully.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so he's got a point there, but I still maintain, at least on X, the conversation really is about this culture war, and maybe
Oh yeah.
are we too into it, or is it really that
Yeah.
important?
Well, that's a good question. I think you can get into social media and it could be an echo chamber one way or the other. So we always have to check ourselves, turn our phone off, turn our computer off, go outside,
Mm,
go for a walk or something, and then assess, yeah, your personal community. But what I can tell you, I started a Substack 3 years ago, Dr. Owen Anderson, Dr. Owen Anderson, to report from the inside of the university for people like your dad, who I don't
mm,
know him, but I would guess he would say, yeah, universities are pretty liberal. We all know that. No one sends their
right.
kids to universities to become conservative. But I wanted to let parents know how bad it is, much worse than you'd ever think. And
Mm,
so we have events at ASU about the benefits of polyamory, about how we need to
mm,
decolonize the United
yeah.
States. And people, your dad might think, well, that you guys are just overblowing it. It's not that big of a deal. Well, it's the
Mm,
largest state
mm.
university in the country. What ASU is doing is what the other ones are all doing also. And our universities are pretty important. Our universities are pumping out students who believe whiteness is bad, that you can judge a person based on their skin color. That's not a small problem.
Exactly, exactly. And I said to him, I said, "Well, then it's kinda your fault. If you were oblivious to it, and, then you were oblivious to it, and you let the cultural," because he's an economic lefty for sure, but he
Okay.
always says, "Hey, Brian, your uncles and I love them and so
Mm-hmm.
respect my family." So,
Mm-hmm.
but this type of people, this economic leftist, they're not necessarily for this cultural left
Yeah.
deconstructive stuff, but they let it happen.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is the Democrats have to own, for example, trans surgeries for kids because they've doubled down on it. It'd be one thing if
Yeah,
like if I found out there was something like that in the Republicans, I would call it out and say, you guys have
right.
to renounce that or I'm out of here.
It's
The
so
Democrats
tough.
doubled down and
I
said it's not a
know.
big deal.
Yeah, no, the trans thing is so tough because you could say at one point, first of all, kids being, that is of
That's what I'm
course,
talking about. Just I'm not talking about adults doing what they want. I'm talking about minors.
right.
And
Yeah,
the Democrat Party has doubled down. So I'm just bringing up that there's people like your dad who are, great people, I'm sure, and they're left
yeah, yeah,
economically, but they got
mhm,
sucked into this stuff, and on their watch, this flooded the United States.
yeah, on their watch.
And the
Yeah,
sad part is, in American history, there is one party that originally wanted to keep slavery, that started the Civil War to defend slavery. When they lost the Civil War, they imposed Jim Crow laws in the South. They're the ones behind redlining in large cities to make sure that the city stays segregated through real estate. They oppose the Civil Rights Amendment or Civil Rights Movement,
but
and
didn't the
and
party
now
switch?
they're teaching whiteness is bad. There's one party that's done that the
Mm,
whole time, and there's one party that has always said
mm.
universal human rights. Your skin color is not what matters. It matters that you're a human. And it's just like, man, it doesn't go back and forth. It's one party that says one thing and one party that says the other thing.
You don't buy into the party switch?
No, I mean, you got because the only place that would make any sense is in the 60s when you had blue dog Democrats switching over to the Republican Party. And the Republican Party I think, yeah, you should have been clear about your position against that. But they were
Mm,
eager to get the votes. But that's the only time. Otherwise, no, it's been the Republicans from the beginning. They start with the civil, basically just before the Civil War, but they're beginning principles from the beginning
mhm.
of our United States, which is, yeah, we don't judge people on skin color. We don't judge them on that. We judge them that they're all created equal by God. So the Democrats
Well,
have a horrible track record, but they control the education. And so no kid, no high
mhm,
school or no college student knows that. If you ask a
yeah.
high school or a college student who's the racist party, oh, that's the Republicans.
Right. No, that was me. That's why I had to start the podcast when I studied CRT. I go, dude, everything I thought I
Mhm.
believed, all the conversations I had with my Republican friends in high school, I was the wrong one. But
Mhm.
like at least on social issues, in many ways. But I
But
certainly
let's say
agree.
for your dad, he's
Yeah,
worried he's worried about healthcare. And
yeah,
maybe the Congress didn't get the vote he wanted in December. But that's a small piece of Obama having destroyed the healthcare system. So
right.
the problem is it's already destroyed. It's not that the
Right.
current Congress didn't do something in
And getting
December.
fixated, it's the fixation on Trump being such a devil, being such an, being such an, being so disgusted with the guy, not being able to recognize the good that he's doing and what he represents in the context of what we're describing
Yeah.
culturally. And so basically, and Matt Walsh says this, the economic thing is up in the air on the right. I mean, you have your
Mhm.
Elon Musk, you have your anarcho-capitalists, and you have
Yeah.
your, Marjorie Taylor Greene's maybe a little more socialist. Okay, but starting point has to be stop with the toxic stuff.
Yeah. Just you have to deal with all the fraud, or there's no system left in
Yeah,
which to have a debate about what to do economically.
right.
And the
Here's what,
fraud is just
yeah,
staggering.
here I believe, just to kind of here's what I think about American politics. This is about as deep as I get. I think American idea is brilliant and beautiful. I love our country. I think slavery was obviously an inherent original sin, and we fought a civil war over it. And I think, the Black relationship to America is profound and we need to basically be reverent of it. And I think America is essentially two things: a white settler country that had that experience with slavery and a civil war over it, and it's also a nation of immigrants, of reasonable immigration. It changed by immigration, and so I think it's both of those things. And the way I look at it is, you combine them, you take the melting pot framework. There is something to conserve for conservatives, but we don't have to be,
Mhm.
religious zealots. We don't need it in the public sphere necessarily,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you can't tip it the other way. So neutral public sphere,
Mhm.
that kind of thing, reasonable everything, common sense,
Yeah.
bold leadership. This is what Trump is for me, and I kind of like it.
Well, and also the I don't know if you know who Shelby Steele is. He's a African American professor, worked at Stanford, and he's outspoken as an African American and a
Mhm.
conservative because he's been ostracized from all the normal paths to being a
Mm,
famous professor. If he would have been on the left, he would have been
that's too
famous,
bad.
but he's on the right. And so his son Eli Steele, together they make movies. They're coming out with one this spring called White Guilt,
Mm,
and they did one about Ferguson and Michael Brown's shooting. So
mm,
documentaries, so really
right.
useful. But what Shelby Steele says is that it wasn't slavery that's our original sin. It's using race to get power that is our original sin. And the Democrats have been
Mm,
doing it the whole time. They're still using race to get power.
mm,
And so that includes slavery, because slavery is one of the ways that you use race to get power, but it's not limited to that. And we need to stop using race to get power, stop letting people do that. But behind it, I think, really is a problem that I study in philosophy of religion called the problem of evil. And
mm,
all of us face this problem in our life. All of us wonder, why is there suffering? Why is my life not work out the way I want it to? Where is God? And so what Marxism does very well is it appeals to that problem and it says it's actually not your fault. The
mm,
reason why you have suffering is someone else called the rich. And that works
mm,
for about 99% of people, because even if you're a 1 millionaire, there's the 10 millionaire guy. And
right.
so there's a very few people who are so rich that it doesn't really work for them. But otherwise, it says you're not to blame, someone else is, and that feels good because you don't have to take any personal responsibility. You can stop listening to Jocko, and you can start saying, "Yeah, I don't have to take personal responsibility and be disciplined. It's their fault." And so I think what the right also needs to do is offer a much better solution to the problem of evil, and we're starting on that road. For example, the just the reality of fraud reminds us that moral evils start inside of us. We're
Mm,
not forced to be bad. You could be
mhm,
oppressed and choose to never steal.
right.
So the Marxist narrative, we need to counter that narrative. And I wonder, like with healthcare, if that gets put in there, like I deserve healthcare from my government and Trump's not delivering, therefore Trump's bad. Well, why did you think you deserve health care from your government? That most of human history has not had anything like that. That's not clearly
Right.
a natural right.
Yeah, it's so interesting because on one level, it seems very fair to say, look, this is about individualism versus collectivism, and it's broad and it's easy to just say that. And people like my dad would say, "Okay, I get all that, but what about healthcare? Let's talk about a concrete issue." And so, yeah, just the question of what is the role of government is interesting, but
Well, here's the
we have,
problem.
yeah,
Economics is the study of the distribution of scarce resources. you don't really study the economics of air unless you're maybe talking about like clean air versus polluted air in an urban
Mm,
setting. Otherwise, there's no limited resource called air. We all breathe each second and don't have to pay for that. But when you get to something like gold, okay, gold's very limited. So now economics studies the price of gold, and healthcare is
mm,
one of those. Healthcare has limited
mm.
resources.
I see.
And so if the poor guy gets cancer and the billionaire gets cancer, who's going to get access to those limited resources? Well, the best solution across the board for economics, with whatever it is to provide more of that thing, then to encourage capitalists to produce a gold factory, gold mine, and mine gold. And that affects it so that now more people have access to gold. And the same is true for healthcare stuff. Yeah, if there's only one Mayo Clinic, the rich guy is going to be able to get in there before the poor guy. But what if you open the doors up so that you have incentive to produce lots of medical resources so that now everyone has access to them? That would be the solution, not government keeping the current lack of resources and then getting involved in who gets what, because that doesn't help us. There's still limited resources.
Well, I can tell you that I'm no economist, but I take Elon Musk. I'm kind of persuaded by a guy like Elon Musk when he said, when a government is running an enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
which is maybe a oxymoron, there's no market
Yeah.
feedback loop and it cannot be done efficiently.
Yeah,
And
it's
it all
never
breaks
looked
down.
well. Yeah, you don't see,
Yeah.
you never point to like, hey, the Soviets did this really well. They did nothing really well.
And maybe Mom Dinah will do it with the grocery stores. Look.
Mhm. Well, here's the problem. He keeps talking about he's going to pay for this with the rich. The governor of New York keeps telling him, stop. We're not going to give free buses out. We don't have the money. And the rich are leaving New York City. So who's he going to tax?
Yeah.
Pretty soon, the rich person he's talking about is the guy that makes $80,000.
Right.
Because he's the richest guy left after everyone's
Right.
left New York. So that's what happens is it's still a free country with free motion. The Soviets could at least say, you're not moving.
Mm-hmm.
You're staying put, and we're going to tax you. Here, you can say, yeah, I'm moving down to Florida. I'm out of here.
Yeah, it's like I certainly don't identify with that group anymore, and I think it's fair to say that my dad would. I think it's fair to say. I don't want to assume actually.
Is your
but
family from the East Coast?
Yes,
What
yes.
part?
Jersey.
Okay. So
Yeah.
do you already does New Jersey already have an inclination to not like a New Yorker like Trump?
Well, my dad. I can speak for my father and say that there's nothing that my father would be interested in personality-wise about Donald Trump. Basically nothing. Yeah. And I can't even get him to acknowledge. Well, he will acknowledge his talent and his ability. And he has called him a genius. So he recognizes real, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
there's nothing that he finds. And I would say there are a lot of people like him as well. But it's a mix. A lot of people who love Trump. And
I was actually working for a year at Princeton when the Bridgegate thing blew up. I remember I'm sorry, I'm blanking his name. What was his name?
Chris
Christie. He lives near Princeton, and so I would sometimes see him at stuff. I don't know him; he doesn't know my name, but I would see him like giving a talk or going to this thing, and all that was blowing up at the time. And I remember, he, even though he's a conservative Republican, ends up really not liking Trump. They end up becoming enemies.
Oh, and they were friendly, and Christie was on Trump's transition team,
Yeah.
I believe, initially.
The first time.
Yeah. So Trump is just a fascinating character. I mean, look, so weird with COVID, and I'm sure Trump has made mistakes and been over the top about things. You have that. You have such a abrasive, direct personality. In contrast with this environment that is saying to males, don't be male, don't be alpha.
Yeah.
And he is the ultimate, like, fuck you.
Yeah, he just does whatever he wants. Yeah. Well, and then I think we've lost a sense of humor because he just cracks me up when he talks, but it drives people who don't understand him crazy. And I try to explain to them, like as far as I understand it right now, and this might turn out not to be correct, but the news is reporting we took time to blow up Hugo Chavez's mausoleum while capturing the president.
Right. I didn't know that.
That's hilarious.
Right.
Like, just while Trump's building monuments in DC, we blew up the communist monument. And people are saying, well, that's a war crime. Was that a civilian target? Was there any anti-aircraft stuff there? Why are you blowing that up? But just getting the picture of, we're taking away a communist monument from it's an image of oppression to the Venezuelan people. And we took a moment to do that, even though as far as I understand, that's not necessary to do the military
That
in.
is so interesting. So Kill Tony, you know that comedy show,
Yeah.
Tony Hinchcliffe. I don't watch it. No hate against it. I'm sure it's actually I watch the clips
Mhm.
all the time. It's amazing. But in this one particular clip I saw recently, for some reason, Tony Hinchcliffe was talking about maybe he was being interviewed actually, and he was saying how the comedians he's really plugged into the comedians of the day,
Mhm.
being one himself. He said
Yeah.
most comedians think Trump is like the funniest human being on the planet, and I
Yeah.
certainly do. I was trying to tell that to my dad. Dad wasn't buying it, and so his girlfriend was like, an hour later, she goes, "I'm still stuck on that. Is he funny?"
Yeah.
So people recognize there's a certain
Because they call it lie. They'll say, "Oh, he lied." No, he told a joke. He'll
Mhm,
pause in the middle of a speech and say, like he's reading
right,
something great we did, but it's not as great as me. And he goes back to
right.
the speech,
Oh
and it's
my
just like,
God, he's the funniest guy.
and today I'm still laughing because of the news conference today. He's mentioning he decides to mention the Monroe Doctrine, 200
Right.
year old doctrine,
Yeah.
and he says, "Well, from now on it'll be called the Donroe Doctrine," and I'm
Yes.
still laughing.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
hilarious.
It's funny. My dad, who I told him because we were arguing about Venezuela. This was on Thursday night, and I was just saying, "Look, Dad," because he was coming from and I don't mind coming from the perspective of Constitution. Of course, I mean it matters. So okay, Rand Paul, that kind of argument, that's
Yeah.
fine. But I just said, Dad, I don't know what I don't know what Trump knows. All I know
Mhm.
is that Maria Machado, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in opposition in
Yeah.
exile, is singing his praises. Does that
Yeah.
mean nothing to you? Marco Rubio, who you acknowledge that is very smart. There is a whole apparatus that is
Mhm.
behind this, and that's not
Yeah.
necessarily a good thing. But why is Don
Yeah.
crazy?
You have to
And
say
he
they're all hoodwinked
and he
or
said he
something.
hadn't read the national security memo that came out recently, but he had heard of the Don Rowe thing. So I'm like, you
Mhm.
do think he's funny? Come on.
It's hilarious. Well, and also, I don't know your dad, but I know people somewhat like him who said nothing when Obama was ordering drone strikes without any congressional approval, including killing Americans without criminal trials,
My
who
dad's,
had not been.
I don't know, like at the time, you know, who he could have been vocal to and if he
Mhm.
was, but I imagine he was, and he's
Sure, but the liberals I know, like the
yeah,
professors, so I'll switch to the professors
yeah.
since I'm not your dad. They
But
they said nothing.
it's possible that he
Yeah.
was, but I
But the
doubt it.
professors said nothing. They didn't care that Obama was not getting congressional approval and even killing
Mm,
Americans who
mm,
had not been tried.
right.
But this is that happened dozens of times, dozens of drone strikes. I think 2 Americans were killed that didn't go through trial. But then this one thing, they'll say, "What? There's no congressional approval. I can't believe this." Well, it's a legal issue, not a war. And
Mm,
we built the
mm,
Venezuelan oil industry. So people will say, "Yeah, look at you guys. You're just going after the oil rich country." Yeah, the one we built and they stole. Right? And they thought we would never do anything. Well, we've
right.
taken back our property. That's our property.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that, I mean, I think Phoenix is touched by it, but I know New Jersey and New York are touched by the fentanyl stuff. Trump talks about that quite often.
So is my family. And
Yeah.
I can tell you, without making this entire episode about my dad, who I love and
He
respect and
sounds
admire.
great. Yep.
No, he really is. He
Yeah,
really
I'm
is.
sure.
And
Yeah,
I've
I'm not
talked
being
to him.
sarcastic. I'm being serious. Like,
Oh
I'm
no,
sure your
yeah, no,
dad's great guy. He
I know.
raised you. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, he's a great guy. Very well read, and that's fine. Doesn't mean he's right. Doesn't mean he's wrong.
mhm.
But he's a good citizen, I would say, even if I don't necessarily agree with him. And oh, what did you just say that prompted me to tie it again? Well, I was just trying to.
Fentanyl. I mean, this is
Yeah,
we're
he's
stopping
not.
we're
He's
stopping
not
fentanyl.
convinced at all that any of the action is anything to do with fentanyl.
Mhm.
So he's not convinced by that.
Well, the proof will be in the pudding, right? I mean, that may
Yeah,
or may not be true. The proof will be, does the
yeah,
pipeline stop? And we'll
right.
notice that in terms of deaths.
But to the point, actually, that I was thinking about is like when you talk about Trump bombing the mausoleum, which seems like in a vacuum, like, oh, that's kind of grotesque. But when you think about it, in what Trump does, everything is a deterrent. Everything is messaging,
Mhm.
signals, and like it or not, I happen to like it. This is how he operates.
Mhm.
Because he's run properties. He understands a border. He
Mhm.
understands you send security to the issue. It's a deterrent. You
Mhm.
enforce, and so he errs on the side of over enforcing.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't have we have to be vigilant and
Mhm.
and preserve our rights. Yeah, of course, with any president, especially one who's flexing
Yeah.
muscle, in ways that we haven't
Yeah.
expected. But I dig it. I'm sorry.
That's the American system is we've got division of powers. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But in terms of, he's not been the most aggressive. He's still less executive orders than the previous presidents. So we'll
Mm.
see, where that goes. That's the left's fears. Oh no, he's going to be a tyrant. No, no tyrants shrink their government. That's not what a fascist
Right.
does. He grows his
Yeah.
government to everything.
That's
So
why
I
he's
don't
so
think you have any worry
interesting.
about that. But I think if you're an enemy of the United States, if you're stealing from the United States, you should be up
Yeah.
at night. You should be worried.
Yes.
You should be losing sleep.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the message that I got
Yeah.
from
So
in
little
the last
things like the
book.
bombing the mausoleum, you'll see little things pop up like that. The things he says, like the Don
Yeah.
Rowe doctrine, where yeah, he understands symbolism and meaning. And so he took away this communist symbol, celebrating a horrible communist dictator in Venezuela
Right.
who destroyed the standard of living in Venezuela and stole American property and began the process of sending all these drugs through Venezuela. And people say, well, it's not from Venezuela, it's from Colombia. Yeah, it all goes through Venezuela. And so
Mm.
he took away that symbol, and he does stuff like that often. I think is one of the reasons why the leftists at the universities realize that they don't like it, because it's not just George W. Bush where you'll recover with Obama in their mind,
Hmm.
because George W. Bush was still part of the system. Trump is taking away their life's work. No one's going to go back to anti-racism stuff when we get another Democrat. It's done. So
Mm.
you spend
Mm.
3 decades of your life on your leftist, cultural, Marxist stuff, and it's over. This goes
Wow.
back to the earlier point I made about the problem of evil. What was the meaning of your career? And
Mm.
so Trump strikes at that deep, that causes some really deep anxiety and panic in people.
Mm.
The entire purpose of my career just got blown up.
Hmm. Wow. It's so interesting. I had a feeling, man, that when I was taking those electives, I had to talk about it. I had to do a blog or a pod because it just felt so intense. And it sounds like you would certainly agree that this
Oh
has
yeah.
been a very fascinating time, and Trump is a fascinating character in that time. And you're saying it's pretty much over. He killed it. And so what comes
Well,
next?
there'll be something. I'm not saying Democrats are gone or leftism is gone or communism is gone, but the kind that people dedicated their life to is gone.
Mm.
And so that hurts. You lost three
Yeah.
decades. You thought you were fighting for justice. And when Obama got elected, I remember one of my colleagues, he was
Mm.
in Chicago that night, and I saw him the next week, and he said he was just like, it was like he'd had a religious conversion, and he'd seen the
Mm.
highest being. He was just saying
Mm.
the energy in Chicago, like they had finally brought about utopia on earth. And all of
Wow.
that's in the rearview mirror, and it's being exposed as having had a ton of corruption. Yeah, he wasted all that time of his life. That's got to hurt.
Yeah. Wow. So to kind of put a bow on this conversation about critical theory and this cultural war, which I get, as you say, is not over, but a major battle has been won. What can you tell me about the lawsuit that you mentioned earlier
Mhm.
and this scuffle you have about the land acknowledgments?
Yeah. Oh
Tell
yeah.
me.
That was that was something last one. So the lawsuit is over that required training, and it's still making its way through the courts. But the idea is, can your employer make you sit through training that blames people based on skin color? Now, if we said blames people based on black skin color, we'd all say, of course not. No one would be okay with that. But almost half of our population is okay if it's blaming people for white skin color. And so my contention is that's still wrong. You can't do that. An employer, especially a state employer, it does get a little different when it's in the private sector, but
Mm.
a state employer can't make you sit through racist training. And so it's an
Mm.
employment issue. So that even though the leftist colleagues, maybe they say, oh, I hope Anderson loses because he's conservative, but I say, no, not so fast,
Mm.
because you're only looking at the specific issue, not that this is employment. Can you, as an employee, hold your employer accountable? That will very well maybe be you one day about one of the MAGA things you're scared about.
Right.
And so you should hope I win because I'm protecting employee rights.
Perfect example of, for me, validation of what MAGA is, which is the colorblind, the neutral norm, the stuff we
Yeah.
grew up on, fairy tales. Maybe we thought the 90s was a fairy tale, but at least there has been this principle of
Yeah.
equal justice, more accessible as time goes
Yeah.
on.
That's the hope. And I mean, that's the thing about the American system. It's not that the American system was perfect in 1776. It's that the American system set up a way to correct itself without warfare. One time we fell into civil war. Other than that, we're old. People don't realize this because they think European nations are older. They're not. France is on its 5th republic since we've had one.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Measured
Germany
by
has had to be
governments.
rebuilt. So we're actually the oldest republic going. And that's because we have a system where you say, hey, there's something unjust going on. Great. That's what we've got lawsuits for. And even when we make fun of lawyers, but that's a very important class of people in our country. And the fact that there's courthouses is really wonderful. On top of that, hey, you can run for local office because that's where things actually get done. And you can make some changes yourself if you think there's a problem. So what a great system.
I love it. I mean, I grew up next to a baseball field, you know, with my hand on my heart doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
So I'm all for the basic system, improve it, sure, but I like it. We don't need to deconstruct it. Actually, let's pivot to for the woke right, because
can I mention the land acknowledgement thing? You mentioned that real quick.
Do it.
So in my college for the last 5 years, they open every faculty meeting with a Native American land acknowledgement. One time they even said, let's close our eyes and bow our heads. I said, well, wait a minute. That's a religious posture, right? I'm not going to close my eyes and bow my heads while you read something. But the idea behind them, if you look up the literature about what are these for, they're to raise a problematize, they call it, the idea of the United States. The United States is existing on stolen land. And so every meeting has to start acknowledging that. Now, these faculty meetings are meant to just be boring business meetings. They're not political. We're not allowed to use state resources for our own political agenda. So I've objected, and I've been told, no, they can do whatever they want. And so what I did at our last faculty meeting a month ago is I said, hey, can I read out my own? Let's have diversity. ASU's motto is inclusive diversity. So let's do that. And I wrote my own called the Settler Capitalist Land Acknowledgement. I put it up on the board and acknowledges all the settlers and the capitalists who invested in the Phoenix area to make it now the 5th largest city in the country and one of the great cities in the world. We've got the Taiwanese microchip plant coming here. That's from capitalism. And I motioned, so I got to get someone to second the motion so we can then go to a debate about it. No one would second it, not even to debate it. Because if you debate it, doesn't mean it'll happen. It just means now you're debating it. And no one would allow there to be an additional. I said, you can read your land acknowledgement first. I'll go second. And so it, for me, it proved, there's not really interest in diversity. It's an interest in their ideology. It squeaked in with claiming to be diverse, but then it clamps down on any really diverse opinions.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. And again, it just puts a exclamation point on the point of what we're talking about, which is the difference between diversity and understanding with reconstruction, deconstruction, reconstruction. Yeah.
Well, and also just shows I personally think it's hypocrisy, because when you talk about the Native American land acknowledgement, they'll say, well, land is based on firsties. We all know that from being a kid. I touched it first, so it's mine. So land is based on firsties, and you're a settler if you came there after the fact.
Right.
And say, okay, well, then let's apply that to Minneapolis.
Right.
You got people coming here settling in Minneapolis, and they weren't firsties, and they're defrauding the system. Well, no, wait though. They're okay because they're oppressed. And so a settler who's oppressed trumps the firsties who aren't oppressed. Well, that just shows an ignorance of the system of who's the settlers moving west, right? These are poor people looking for a better life. They're not living high as billionaires. So it just shows that they don't know history. What they're looking at is just skin color. That's all that matters. And applying their Marxist dialectic, because even their land acknowledgement will be thrown out the window as soon as firsties doesn't fit their system.
Interesting point. I mean, I agree with you on substance. I do acknowledge a difference between settlers, colonial settlers, and, if you want to call it mass immigration, I don't know if it's fair to call it that, but some sort of larger than just a couple people immigration of to a country legally, then defraud, then defrauding the system is another issue. But
there's a key word in what you just said, to a country. And so this is why you want lawyers in court systems. When someone moved when the Spanish show up in the 1500s in the Southwest, what courthouse do they go to inquire about land acknowledgement? Who owns the land? There's no system. The people there had not taken any time to develop
Mm,
a court system
right.
and have documents in place to say land ownership. It was a complete tribal system of warfare.
And
And
that's
so
why, if I
the
recall,
oppressed
sorry, go
tribes,
ahead. Yeah.
well, I was going to say the oppressed tribes back then actually liked the Spanish. They allied themselves with the Spanish because the Spanish protected them from the aggressive tribes.
Right.
And so the
Yeah.
idea of settlers needs to be looked into as well.
No, that's a really great point. And I'm not saying I feel this way or that way on it,
Sure.
but yes, I mean, I think this was, if I recall my first year law course correctly, I think it was, yeah, it would have been property. Certainly
Oh,
would have
good.
been
Yeah.
property. I think it was Chief Justice Marshall who basically the discovery doctrine, which basically justified the ownership of lands being in the white settlers versus the Native Americans, despite firsties, on the basis of, well, the white settlers brought civilization, and I
Mhm.
think Christianity may even be mentioned in that opinion.
I'm sure
So
it
they
was. Yeah. Mhm.
so they brought so it's not just like two exactly equal
Mhm.
socially social entities had an interaction.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
was a very
Well, and
different.
also it, it is it is that sometimes. So, for example, the problem was also that you'd have a very scarce population who say, "I own everything I can see, even though I don't really use it at all." And if you come into anything I can see, where I might
Mhm,
or might not hunt sometimes, but I believe
mhm,
my gods gave it to me. So their side's also religious. They'd say our gods
mhm,
gave us this land,
mhm,
but there's you can't. I mean, where could you do that on Earth and just say anything I see I now own?
right.
And maybe
Yeah,
one of my
right.
ancestors also walked there. So with tribes like that, then that doctrine comes into play. But it doesn't apply to, for example, Mexico. The United States said we own up until the Rio Grande River, and Mexico said no, you don't. But Mexico has a court system in place, so we
Mhm,
did diplomacy for a number of years, arguing about where does Texas start and stop. When that broke down, we went to war and had the Mexican American War, and it's very interesting. People don't realize we conquered Mexico. We had troops in Mexico City.
right,
We could own all of Mexico,
right, we pulled
but
out,
we're
right?
not an empire. We gave it
Right,
all back and just said, hey, the borders we said, that's our border, the Rio
right.
Grande. And so the United
That's a
States,
power move.
what?
That's a power
Yeah,
move.
no, it was. But and all those soldiers, those all came back and were involved in the Civil War. Like Grant and Ulysses that
Right.
conquered Mexico, they were all involved in the Civil War. But the point I'm making is just that,
Mm,
yeah, settlers occurs in a specific context of complete collapse. Not you
mm,
can't move currently into northern Mexico and be an American settler. The United States government would say that doesn't count. You got to obey Mexican laws on their side of the border. So the question is, are there such times as complete collapse of civilization? I mean, I think yeah, I think there are.
or are there areas where civilization doesn't exist in the ways
Yeah,
that we would recognize it?
yeah, because in this area, the Aztecs did have influence. And so, of course, it's stronger the further south you get. But people forget, they weren't conquered primarily by Cortez and 500 Spaniards. They were conquered by other Native Americans teaming up with Cortez because the Aztecs were persecuting, capturing, and sacrificing their neighbors. And so the Spanish story is a mixed story. There's things that they did that I don't think were good. I'm also not a Catholic. I'm a Protestant. And
Mm,
so there's, Catholic Protestant divisions there. But overall, people tell it either as a only one side, it's a great conquest, or only the other side, it's a horrible conquest. And the
mm,
truth of history is there's always mixed. But the
mm,
fall of the
mm.
Aztec Empire, no one's crying about that.
Oh, I love that you said that about the mix because I was just thinking, like, this is what MAGA is for me. It's not about a rose-colored view of history. It's not
Yeah.
about going to white only or white government only or a woke right vision, which I'm going to talk to you about the woke right in a minute. But it's about looking, taking history, but also not doing the opposite, which is the
Mhm.
CRT lens, all bad.
Yeah.
So it's looking at it,
Realism.
realism. Thank you. And healthy pride. This is what we got.
Mhm.
We can't change the past. Realism, nailed it. Common sense. Let's move forward. What's the best way to move forward given what we got?
Yeah.
And can we be proud of ourselves?
Yeah. And just interestingly for your audience, before the United States existed, the Europeans, especially the English Europeans, were operating on a doctrine from John Locke. Everyone's probably knows a little bit about John Locke, Second Treatise on Governments, what influenced our government. But what he had the work theory of land ownership.
Well, John Locke was big private property, right?
Yeah, but it's based
Individualism.
on work. In other words, you own that
Mhm.
field because you plow it every year to grow crops.
I see.
And so you put a fence around it to say that's the area that I'm going to work. I'm not going to work your area on your side of the fence. I'm working my area. And so that's the question is who owns what land? Is it firsties or is it the people who develop it and put work into it?
That's
So there was
interesting.
just a case that got upheld. I don't remember which circuit, which federal circuit it is in. It's from Washington State. So you might know which one that is,
I
Ninth
don't know, ninth,
Circuit,
ninth,
Seventh
I think
Circuit.
probably.
But the professor was fired from Washington State or University of Washington because he included a land acknowledgement on his syllabus, which
Mm.
said the local Salish people contributed almost no work and therefore have no ownership in the land occupied by Washington University of Washington. And so
Mm.
I think he's an economics professor. So he's just making a point to say firsties is not the best way to determine land ownership because none of those tribes were first either. There's a work theory of land ownership. And if you
Mm.
want the work theory, you've got to make courts. Because then someone might say,
Mm.
well, yeah, but you put your fence one foot over onto my side. I know we have surveyors and courts who can solve all those problems.
It's amazing that we're still talking about land ownership in 2025. And
Yeah.
that's the point, right? They want to question, and that private property is the fundamental thing. It goes, God gave me this is the right as I see it, and kind of
Yeah.
why I've become aligned with it. For now, at least, is the right. God gives us our rights. Fundamental right is private property. I'm accountable for what I do in my life and with my body, for my outcomes, for me and my family.
Yeah.
The family unit is so important, and that's the basic structure of society. The left is not necessarily for that structure, and that's the battle.
Mhm. Well, it was really it still seems like the Southwest. It was really a religious conflict, not, it comes to a head over land. But when a settler moves in and says, I'm going to ranch these acres or I'm going to farm these acres, you can hunt around that because there's still plenty of land for you to hunt on. Animals don't only live on my land, they move around. But that's not the issue. The issue is you can't fence off land because land is divine. Land is one of our gods. And
Mm.
so we don't fence it off and you shouldn't fence it off. And so then the Christian would say, no, it's not. It's created by God, but it's not God. And so at the
Mm.
heart of behind the land ownership is also some very important religious differences about the nature of reality. And I think
Fascinating.
you'll see on the left the rise of eco-mysticism, which says, no, the
Mm.
earth is God. And we are a cancer on the face of the earth. And they'll almost always quote Native Americans when they talk about this.
No, super interesting. So, and I do want to touch upon the alien question briefly,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
That
So,
fits into the New Age stuff, the
yeah, and so Native
eco-mysticism.
American, lore, all of it is super
Yeah.
relevant. So let's put a pin on that for just a second. Come back to it. First, do you agree with me that the woke right is basically the overreaction to
Oh,
the
yeah.
far
Yeah, I think it's a psyop even because it's so
Okay,
bad.
right,
Because the left says, "Hey, you guys are all Nazis," and
right,
it's like, none of us are not. We want smaller government. We want
right,
less government involvement. And then all of a sudden Nick Fuentes pops up. I say,
right.
well, okay, uh, but then we see like all of his followers are not from American accounts, right?
Mm,
And so I don't know any details about Nick Fuentes or who he's paid by, but it just seems like okay, this seems like a psyop because the right is against the Nazis and the communists are leftist philosophies. They're
right.
both socialists and they argue about if it should be international or national socialism, but they want a
Mm,
tyrannical government. The American right wants a small government that's not in
hmm
our business. Get out of my life. You only show up when we need you for justice matters or defense of the country. So that's weird that shows up all of a sudden when they're making that insult. But I think the woke right is the same cultural relativism. So they might hear what
mm,
I'm saying and saying, yeah, you're right. And that's why we need to do whiteness. And I'm saying, no, that's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing for a universal human nature, just
hmm
like our Declaration of Independence says. And woke right is just the same. I call it postmodernism, the
Exactly.
same
Same thing.
postmodern moral relativism. Mhm.
Exactly. Right. And that's why Tucker views Matt Walsh as an interesting character because he says, Matt, twice to him in the interview, he said, you got a foot in both worlds. And of course, everyone's talking about, and they talked about the vacuum that Charlie Kirk left
Mhm.
behind and what a
Yeah.
figure he was. And I didn't even realize really until he died, was killed I had become aware in the months prior about this kind of split on the right, and
Yeah.
of course, I had made the assessment that the people like yourself, MAGA was about 95% of MAGA, and the woke right, if at all, was about 5%. But it's maybe growing, or it's got this metastasizing quality about it right now. And with Charlie gone, what's going to happen? I'm not terribly worried about it, but I do think it needs to be talked
Yeah.
about and pushed back on.
Well, I'm the TPUSA faculty advisor for ASU students. And the reason I do that is because it's the only place at ASU where you can have actual debate. So we've had
Mm,
Democrat students show up and say, hey, I know you guys are mostly Republicans, but I just want to have debates. My professors don't let me debate. They just push their ideology. And so I'm there as a philosophy professor. I'm there saying, yeah, I want to help this happen. They need a faculty advisor or they can't meet. And I don't think they'll find anyone else at ASU. So I'm happy to provide a place where students can debate. And I was at TPUSA's AmFest a few weeks ago. And so I
mm,
saw Ben Shapiro come out.
mhm.
And as a logic professor, I loved it because he said, learn how to debate. He's talking about Candace Owens, but he also mentioned Tucker. Did he mention, he might have mentioned Megan Kelly too, because she came after him
I'm
later in
sure
the
he
week.
did. Yeah.
And he said, state what you think and then defend it with evidence.
Hmm.
Stop doing the thing where you say, hey, I'm just asking questions. I don't know. Where was Erica when Charlie died? Stop that stuff. And
Hmm.
then Michael Knowles
Hmm.
came out and he was a little more neutral. Russell
Hmm.
Brand was in there somewhere. Oh, Russell
Hmm.
Brand came out, I think, second because he said, Ben is great. He does a lot of great stuff, but I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So I like
Right.
that Russell Brand like redirected it to Christianity and
Hmm.
Judaism, and then he did his little comedy bit. But then Tucker came out last, and he did his Tucker thing of just he has kind of like a shock. He acts all shocked about things, and I can't believe this happened. And he's
Right.
attacking me. He wants to silence me. And no, Ben didn't say be silent. Ben said publicly debate what you're saying. Stop hiding it behind innuendos. And so I really appreciate Ben Shapiro, even though I disagree with him also about who Jesus is. I appreciate the fact that he's good at public debate, and we need more of that.
My dad would certainly agree with that. And that is the problem with people. I'll put myself in this category. Perhaps it applies to someone like Candace Owens. Perhaps it applies to Megan Kelly. Perhaps it applies to Tucker Carlson. Perhaps it applies to Joe Rogan in different ways, where we are just asking questions. And at
Mhm.
a certain point, you are kind of evading responsibility for a perspective. And
Yeah.
do you have an obligation as someone with an audience at a certain point to behave in a certain way and it's not necessarily clear that the answer is yes, but with great influence comes great
Well,
responsibility.
and it's not the asking questions; it's what you're using that for.
Mm.
Imagine
Hmm.
you brought up your dad a few times. I don't know
Yeah.
him, so imagine I
Yeah.
start asking, "Hey, where was your dad when Charlie got shot?" I'm just asking. I'm
Right.
just asking questions. You'd be like, "Well,
Right.
why are you asking that question? That's a weird question to ask. Where was my dad?"
No, fair
And so
point.
it's like it's not the question. It's
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
asking that question,
Great
and then
point.
a young kid, probably 20 years old, he's become internet famous now. Asked Ben Shapiro, USS Liberty, Ben,
Hmm.
USS Liberty.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's like no 20-year-old college student is laying awake at night worrying about the USS Liberty, right? That's clearly you've got some other question. So Ben said to him, well, it's friendly fire. America has also killed allies in friendly fire. But what's your real question? And the
Mm.
kid repeated it about USS Liberty. Say, no, that's not no one, you're not thinking about USS Liberty. You've got
Hmm.
another agenda. And he's right. No kid, if I was to ask my students, do you know about the USS Liberty? They would say, no, I don't know what that is. And so Tucker brought that up too. Like, why is Ben lambasting a poor kid and
Mm.
questioning his motives?
I
Well, it's
see.
part of the just asking questions thing. I'm just asking, why did Israel
Mhm,
attack USS Liberty?
mhm.
No, you're not just asking that. Just be honest. That's what I liked about Ben Shapiro. He said, just be honest. If you think it was an agenda to attack an American ship, then just say that. Don't say I'm just asking questions.
Well, the woke right, I mean, Israel is certainly probably the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues,
Mhm.
certainly, that defines the woke right.
Well,
And
I saw Dennis Prager the other day say half of the Jewish population at any moment agrees with you that Israel is a problem. Right? So
mm,
so
right,
doubting this nation of Israel is not an anti-Jewish thing. Yeah, governments
right,
can be corrupt. And Dennis
right,
Prager said, yeah, Jews think the same thing.
right. So it's in a way, it reminds us that, like, how valuable are these labels really? I mean, they have value. That's why we do them. But at a certain point, I wish we could just detach from
Yeah.
all of them.
It's probably just our mind always attempts to find patterns. just
Yes.
what we do. And so we're looking for patterns. So you're right, though. Whoever controls the labels controls the narrative. That's another big part of what the left does.
Mm, right on. Okay, let me transition here to before I ask you about your latest book, which is, I guess, about Samson from the
Yeah, just
Bible.
doing.
Let me ask you a quick question that I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, which is you're a jujitsu instructor, right?
Yeah.
So why is it important? I think you get this question a lot, but I'm curious. Why is it important for Christians to roll around on the mat?
Yeah, I love it. And that's what's funny is people will say, you like wearing pajamas and rolling around on the ground.
Mm,
But I had a wrestling background already, but I got into jiu-jitsu about 5 years ago, just before COVID. And the gym I'm at stayed open. We continued jiu-jitsu the whole time. And I got to a
mm.
point now where, yeah, I'm instructing some of the beginner
Oh,
classes.
wow.
And so I really like it. It's a lifetime thing, It's like something you
Right,
have to do your whole life to be good
right.
at it. So you can't. People say like, "Oh, you must be really good." No, no one would say that. It's not Taekwondo where you can be 12-year-old black belt.
Mm,
So, but why is it good? I think it teaches a lot of the important values, starting with you should care about yourself. You're worth
mm,
defending.
mm,
And so
mm,
we have a program where it's mixed. You have men and women. But we also have a great women's program to teach women how to defend themselves because it targets the specific ways that women get assaulted and then teaches you how to respond to them.
mm,
And the premise behind it is, yeah, you're a valuable thing. You should know how to fight. And you
mm,
might laugh about being on the ground rolling around. However, that's where street fights always end up.
mm,
They'll start standing up, you're talking back and forth, and then you hit each other and fall down. And so if you don't know what to do while you're down there, you're going to lose.
mm. Wow. So it's important for Christians, particularly. Why? Or is it not
Oh, for
particularly
specific,
important?
yeah, I guess my answer was more like the universal appeal for all
Yeah.
humans. But I think it's good for Christians also to remember they can value and defend themselves because one of the things I've spoken about is how the left uses Christian values to tie Christians up.
Mm,
So you'll find this happening all the time that if Christians ever defend themselves in the public square, I'm talking here, just rationally defending their religion,
mhm.
they'll be told, hey, you need to turn the other cheek. You need to have sacrificial love. So you'll find the Christian
Now you're
leftist
talking about
Christian,
God Sod's, what does he call it? And Elon always talks about it.
the Good Samaritan, parable of the Good
No,
Samaritan.
no.
Oh,
Um,
toxic empathy.
yes,
Mhm.
parasitic, suicidal empathy or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah,
That
suicidal
kind
empathy.
of
So they'll say like that you'll find leftist Christian intellectuals saying we should let Somalians come in and steal from us. That's even if it is wrong to steal, we're sacrificially giving ourselves like
mhm,
Jesus did. And that's
mhm,
just nonsense. That's the Bible doesn't
mm,
teach that at
mm,
all. And so I think jujitsu is a great exercise. It's a lot of fun. It's good for the whole family. You could bring wife and kids out there, but it also teaches some good discipline principles that remind us, yeah, it's worth defending your faith
mm,
and you need to learn how to do that. Jiu-jitsu is not the thing. It's a symbol of the other thing, which is learn how to defend your faith.
mm. Have you seen the new, Knives Out? Do you
No, I
know
haven't
the
yet.
do you know that
Yeah,
movies?
I know that. Yeah, I've seen the other
The
two.
Daniel Craig mystery murder
Yeah.
stuff? So I won't do any spoilers, and we haven't finished it, but, without spoiling anything, I thought it was very interesting. We didn't finish it because we didn't think it was that good. I'll finish it at some point, the 3rd newest one. It takes place in the setting of a church. It's
Okay.
really there's a tremendous religious, through line through the storyline. It's basically pastors are the main characters. And for a while in the movie, there's 2 pastors, and they have one is a super aggressive, you might call him woke right,
Mhm.
overreaction to,
Yeah.
and the other guy is representing a more, empathetic, disarming kind of Christianity. And it's a really interesting, I think,
Yeah.
observation on that dynamic. And I
Yeah.
also I was thinking about Nick as well, Fuentes, and the Groyper movement generally, about how there too is the difference between overexert, like,
Mhm.
you don't need to overdo it. Reexert, defend, sure. But,
Yeah.
so that was just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the things he said about women and what he wants out of women and stuff,
Right.
it's like Andrew Tate level stuff where it's just disgusting. And
Yes.
what you need to learn is, yeah, if you understand that the feminist movement as it now exists, it has
Mm,
been extremely harmful, but you don't want to just replace it with a masculine version of the feminist movement. You want to get back to why are men and women both so important,
Right.
both made by God, both
Right.
working together. Not one of them
Right.
is going to hurt the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
So
sure they
young
would
men don't
defend
know. I mean,
their most offensive statements by saying, "I'm trying to shock the public into recognizing the problem." And it's like, okay, but
yeah,
I'm personally not. You're not going to find me going for that kind of shit.
yeah, that is one. I mean, I think Jerry Springer invented that
Mm,
and just
mm,
kind of shock people with an issue to
right.
get their attention on it. And they might say, "Hey, that's one way." I don't think it has any lasting power, and I think it involves the person doing it in complicity to wrongdoing. I'd much rather have the kind of debate Ben Shapiro or any other logic professor would advocate for, but it doesn't have the same like you're not like you get eyes on the screen by having these shocking things, and that's what people want, eyes on the screen.
Absolutely. And you could argue that there's a role for them. I certainly would agree with you. I think you would agree that they're kind of doing it at their I mean, there goes your reputation, dude. I mean, like you're never going to be until you truly take account for that and say, "You know what?
Yeah,
I was over the line." Don't just Nick Fuentes, don't just hide behind saying it was just me being edgy on the internet and look
yeah,
what the people in power have been doing
mhm,
comparatively. No, take responsible. You and young kids being online, it's different. So it's a
mhm.
whole interesting thing. But at the end of the day, at a certain point, it's
Yep,
like JD Vance is always defending young kids and saying you shouldn't put them in intellectual jail forever for things they do
yeah,
in their 20s online.
yeah.
And I agree,
Mhm.
but you can't excuse it all.
You can also have a character. So a lot of people invent a character, and they'll say, my character is
Mm,
Bob Smith, and Bob Smith says these crazy things, but I'm Owen Anderson. I'm just acting. That's my skit. That's my bit.
mhm. Yeah, well, it's I could see how that would be very tempting. I mean, I often think like, man, I could say the funniest, rudest, most dark thing right now, and it would probably get 10 million views. But like, should I start a random account and do
Yeah.
that? No,
Well, it used to be called putting your hair on fire. Like I could set my hair on fire right now
right,
and people will watch it, but I'm going to be scarred and bald when it's over.
exactly. Mm. So I'm glad you know, haven't been worse than I have been online since I got online a couple years ago. Okay, so Samson, the Samson
So
book
yeah.
is done. It's
Yeah,
out.
so Samson's out. It's been out, I think, almost coming up on a year. And the purpose of that book, it is definitely a Christian book. I don't know if people generally are interested in Samson outside of that, but in Christianity, you're told about Samson as a failed man that God used anyway.
But yeah, let me try to think about what I know about
Mhm.
Samson from
Yep.
Hebrew school days growing up. The long hair, it was his strength.
Yeah.
His girl,
He's
was it
one of the
Delilah?
judges of Israel.
I didn't even know that. Wouldn't have remembered that from the education that I got as a kid. And was it Delilah? Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You
Delilah
guys,
cuts his
Samson and
hair
Delilah.
and he's
He's not
not
supposed to
strong
cut his
anymore.
hair.
I don't
Yeah.
remember even the moral of that story.
Yeah, well, and that's why. So if you think of anything, you'll think, yeah, Samson. He looks roided up. He's huge because he's really strong. He's protecting Israel from the Philistines in his day. He's able to defeat them, just by himself. So when we portray him, we show him as huge. But that's actually defeating the point because the point is he gets his strength from God, not because of how much he can bench press.
Mm,
But also, as a Christian, we read him as typological of who Christ is, who's
mhm,
the true judge of Israel, Israel being the people of God, and who is the one who brings about the defeat of the enemies of the people of God, the Philistines. And so I wrote the book for two reasons. One is to kind of save Samson from this other narrative, which says he's just a failure, instead to show how no, there's actually no failure of that kind in his life. Even the Delilah episode, I reframe that because what Delilah does is she sells him for silver coins. And so in Christianity, this represents the bride of Christ handing him over, betraying him to be killed by the Gentiles.
mm.
So that's still symbolic of what happens to Christ later. Judas sells him for silver coins.
Is Judas
But
the bride
this
of Christ? Is that
No, Judas is the one who is one of his
what?
disciples. Sorry,
So
the
what is
bride
the
of
bride
Christ
of
for
Christ?
everyone. That's the people of God. That's the image that is used throughout the Old Testament prophets, that God is the husband of Israel, and Israel is an adulterous wife who's gone after the idols of the nations.
Hmm.
And so that's one reason. The other reason is to write about what it means to be a man, and especially a religious, Jewish or Christian man who says, I take the word of God seriously, and
Mhm.
I want to see it victorious in our day against the Philistines of our age.
Mm.
And so the subtitle of the book is learning how to fight, and not physically, but getting
Got
into the
that covered
cultural
too,
battles,
just in case.
fighting. Yeah, I can. You might need jujitsu, but getting into the cultural battles and learning how to have victory over the Philistines.
So, what is the narrative that you saved Samson from at a high
Well, he's
level?
normally, for little Christian kids that go through Sunday school, he gets brought up as a failure, but God uses him anyway. And the message is, men, you're failures, but God could use you anyway. Instead of saying, no, Samson actually had the right vision about stopping the Philistines. The other people in Israel, the tribe of Judah, handed him over to the Philistines because they told him, you're causing trouble. We just want the Philistines to leave us alone. And so they bound him, tied him up, handed him over to the Philistines. Because of the power of the Spirit, he broke the bounds and defeated the Philistines by himself. And so I say, no, Samson is not a failure. Samson shows us that you need to have the right vision. You need to know the difference between good and evil, or you'll be fighting a battle, but you'll be on the wrong side of the battle. And you need to be active. You can't just be an internet warrior. You've got to be out there actually raising a family, teaching your kids what is good and evil, getting involved in local politics or your local religious organization,
Mm.
making a difference in your community.
So he was viewed as a failure because he was captured, but it sounded like he won in the end.
Well, he's a failure because of especially the Delilah episode, right? So she's probably a Philistine. It doesn't say for sure, but it seemed like she is, and she's working with them, and she betrays him. So people read that and they say, Samson, how could you let yourself be betrayed by a woman? You're so stupid. And he ends up getting
Mm.
captured at the end. They blind
Mhm.
him and they make him
Mhm.
a slave. And the
Mm.
story ends with they're having a big party to their god Dagon at the
Mm.
Temple of Dagon. It's a huge structure, so you've got a roof supporting 1,000 people, people all around the temple celebrating, and they say, "Hey, let's bring Samson out because we defeated him, and let's make fun of
Mm.
him." And so that story
Mm.
ends with him praying that he could end his life making a great blow against the Philistines. And so they have him in the temple, and he pushes the pillars over, and the temple collapses on
Mm.
him and all of the Philistines also. And so he goes
Wow.
out in victory, so to speak, destroying the Philistines. But he's a failure in the sense
Wow.
that he's handed over, he's blinded by this woman Delilah,
Yeah.
and he ends up
Yeah.
dying with the Philistines instead of ruling Israel until he's an old man. And so I try to show
Holy
how the
shit.
narrative actually, for us Christians, it fits what Christ ends up doing. Because of course he also is killed by the Gentiles,
I see.
but his death is what brings victory over sin.
Wow. Okay. Got it. That's awesome. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yep. So you
I
can find that
remember.
if people want to look me up in general, I have an author's page because I've written a lot of books. Amazon, if you look up Owen Anderson, you'll see my picture. If you want to read about what I do at ASU, you're kind of interested. It's a little bit like a drama because I report on my Substack, which is
Mm.
Dr. Owen Anderson. You'll see my picture, and I've used Substack just to be kind of like the guy reporting on the nonsense that goes on inside the university. And I'm also
Yeah.
active on Twitter. Again, same thing, Dr. Owen Anderson.
Absolutely. No. I love talking to you, and think it's really interesting perspective that you have, and you're doing interesting work, and you're active.
Yeah,
You're
thanks for
living
talking
it,
to me
just
today.
like Samson. Just like
Yeah,
Samson.
I appreciate that. Thanks for talking to me today. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you one final topic.
Yeah.
Let's touch upon the aliens. I mean,
Oh yeah.
every podcast, every
And we mean
popular.
extraterrestrials at this point, just for everyone listening.
Well, do we? I mean, look, Joe
Well, we're not
Rogan.
talking about immigration, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. We're not talking. No, we're talking. We're getting into the spooky section. Speaking of being online and having to check your algorithm and go touch grass and all of this, you
Yeah.
can get caught up in this ecosystem where, my gosh, it seems like there is some disclosure movement happening
Mhm.
with the
Yeah.
documentaries and the hearings and the podcasts and the details. It's like, okay, do we have alien extraterrestrials that have been here since the 30s or longer? Do we
Yeah.
have living under our bases? Is there interdimensional? Is it angels and demons? Non-human intelligence is the buzzword being talked about in
Yeah. That's
congressional
right.
hearings with
Mhm.
UAPs. So for those of us paying attention, for better or for worse, we're going, what the hell
Yeah.
is life is real? What do you think about all that stuff?
Yeah. I think I wrote an article. If you look me up, I write regularly for The Blaze. And I wrote an article
Mm.
about 4 weeks ago about this because Joe Rogan had a guy on who was saying we're just any moment the government's going to admit that we've been using alien technology. And so I
Who?
wrote
Do
an
you know who the
article.
guy was?
I
Yeah.
forget, it's a famous guy in the circles. You'll see it when you look it up. But
Okay.
I wrote an article to say the key word you just used is non-human intelligences. So if someone asked me, do you believe in a non-human intelligence? I would say, of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
God is a non-human
Mm-hmm.
intelligence. Well, no, I mean, besides God. Well, of course I do. Like, there's angels and demons. Those are non-human
Mm-hmm.
intelligences.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean a physical being who came here from another planet. No, it's not possible because the nature of space travel
Mm.
and the time it would take and the amount the age of the universe that the materialists tell us they want about 13 to 15 billion years. There hasn't been enough time for a
Mm.
more advanced alien race to develop on evolution so far ahead of us. In terms
Mm.
of the development of stars that have the planets that allow for life, we're pretty much towards the beginning of what evolution can provide. Second, to get
Mm.
from here to there, it takes so long. You would have to have a self-contained massive city with multiple generations of aliens, assuming that they have a lifespan like ours. You might say, well,
Mm-hmm.
they lived thousands of years. Still, you'll need multiple
Actually, billions of
generations.
years at a time. No, some theories.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
don't
it's like
die, whatever it is.
right.
Because that's my point I'm going to in a second. Is what they become when you go through this. And you just had a study come out like 6 months ago from NASA saying if we want to get a ship from us to the closest planet, it would have to be the size of a matchstick, and we'd have to send millions because most of them will be destroyed because of
Mm.
debris, space debris
Mm.
flying around. So you're not going to get these Star Wars sized ships between planets. Cryo sleep, like that doesn't
Mm.
work. There's no such thing as warp drives. You can't bend space like that. That's all science fiction.
Mm.
Wormholes, if they exist, are for particles. You're not fitting a city-sized ship through a wormhole. So just from a purely materialist perspective, not religious at all,
Mm.
it's impossible that an alien spacecraft came from one of the planets we think exists to us and is now trying to communicate. The humorous thing I point out, in addition to that, is you're telling me they're that advanced and they crashed in New Mexico? I got real doubts
Right.
about the intelligence of these creatures. So
Right.
then what they'll do is they'll switch to interdimensional beings like what we just saw in Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Now you're not talking about a bio being from a local planet, a local hundreds of light years away. You're talking about a demon. And yeah, I think there are demons, and I think humans have tried to contact them for a long time. The Old Testament has a story about King Saul trying to contact Samuel. He goes to a necromancer for that purpose, and Israel had outlawed necromancy. So if you were to tell me that people are still trying to contact demons and that demons promise them wisdom,
Mm.
yeah, of course. I mean, Joe Rogan tells these stories of being on DMT and he
Mm-hmm.
encounters what they call jokers. And these
Mm-hmm.
jokers give him insight. And there's a particular, it's not one of the jokers, but he said there's someone he meets there more regularly to try to get wisdom. It's like, yeah, Joe, the angels of God don't do that. So there's only one other option of what you're talking about.
Mm. Yeah, that's the classic thing is if there are such intelligences, you either think they're angels and demons, or you think they're any other number of things.
Like
S-
call it like a bio entity, like us. In that sense, it's like us that it has a body as well as it's intelligent, not just an
Just
animal.
another materialist being from somewhere else.
Yeah. So
Or
just looking at it from the purely like you're not told this stuff when you look at sci-fi, but no sci-fi we have it's the same as a fantasy. Like Gandalf and Jean-Luc Picard are the same level of fantasy.
so you didn't see the new documentary Age of Disclosure, Uh, and
No,
so
what's that one?
just came out. It was pretty good. It was high production value, good quality
Mhm.
guest. Um, I don't know if you've seen James Fox's documentaries, The Phenomenon, Moment of. I think I've only seen The Phenomenon. It was really good. It was kind of like that, just like wow, makes you feel like there's something really going on. Some
Mhm.
reputable people, and so there's this guy Hal Puthoff. He's like a big scientist, a big player in the whole in the
Yeah.
whole lore, I guess. And I'm saying you don't believe him when he says the crafts basically operate to remove the craft from space time,
Yeah.
and
Well,
so that's why they're.
that's the
And so if
warping.
that's a theory, then they could go anywhere. It's basically like
But
I
when
think
you
if
talk
that
like that, you're talking like Star Trek will say, now our dilithium crystals need lithium ions, or none of it makes any sense in physics. So to remove a physical being from space time, but it's still physical, then it still occupies space somewhere. So the closest they have is
Yeah.
every sci-fi from Interstellar to whatever will show space is like a piece of paper, and you bend it, and then our
Mhm.
ship can go straight through here.
Right.
Yeah, but that's if that happens, that's only for particles, not for city-sized ships.
Mm.
So the physics of it, but what he's getting closer to is what I said. It always ends up in transdimensional, and the travel of intelligence is not spatial.
And
So
so why would they need a craft? Why would a
yeah,
demon need a craft or an angel need
yeah.
a craft is kind of
Yeah, you don't need that. So then part of it is also another aspect I emphasize is the dehumanizing aspect. Ancient Aliens is incredibly insulting to the Egyptians and the Mayans and everyone
mm,
else.
mhm,
Basically, it says you're so stupid you couldn't have figured out any way to do this because we don't quite understand how you did it. So it must have
mhm,
been
mhm,
aliens. But the same thing
right.
is true in post World War II technology. They'll say we developed too quickly. There's no way human scientists could have done this. We must have had information from somewhere else. And again, that's just insulting. And a person
Mm,
like I studied physics in my undergraduate, just study some
wow.
physics before you say that stuff and study the history of the people who did it. It's really interesting to see how we did figure that stuff out. And we did make advances. We didn't need to be told by aliens who can't even avoid crashing in Roswell.
So I guess the theory would be either they're demons and they're using craft to as part of the deception to gain control, or the craft and the beings are all hokey pokey, but demons are real.
Well, I mean, I think about it this way, because in religious studies, we point out how near death and after death experiences where people come back and talk are all culturally relative. So a Christian might say, "Oh, I saw Saint Peter,"
Hmm.
and a Hindu will say, "Oh, I saw Ganesh."
Mm,
Why are these all of a sudden the thing after the advent of flight, and especially during the Cold War, where the countries are trying to keep their most advanced technology secret? You don't have these things coming up before
mhm,
that, before 1948. And so, yeah, the religious studies person, a psychologist, will just say, yeah, this is the psychology of what's going on. There's some liars, there's some crazy people, but there's also some honest people who have a weird experience. And then they don't interpret it as Ganesh or St.
mhm,
Peter. They interpret it as an alien craft that came to visit them because they just
mm.
got done watching a TV show about aliens.
It's so interesting to talk to someone who has a religious worldview, but also materialist and scientific and spiritual.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, here's the other. As a religious studies professor, I also think it's basically the new version of polytheism. So the
Mm,
polytheists believe there are finite beings that have more power than us, but they're not infinite like God the Creator, and they
mhm,
live up there.
mm,
And every now and then they come down here to visit us, and sometimes they take our women or whatnot. Well, this is just modern polytheism. What's your hope? Like Elon Musk or Joe Rogan, what's your hope that aliens will come here and they'll give you some new technology that lets you live forever? Right? You're
mm,
looking again to something besides God, your creator. You ignore God, your
mm.
creator, and you look to some other being who's no different than Zeus or Jupiter for your safety. So in that sense, it's sort of like not new. I mean, Zeus traveled around on a cloud, and these guys travel around on spaceships. But the ancient alien crowds say, yeah, that
Mm.
the cloud was just misunderstood technology. Zeus was an alien.
Right. Right. Wow. It's interesting how you could tie it all together to say the alien narrative being pushed is just another example of the moral relativism or uh, the way to kind of get people away from God, from Christianity,
Mhm.
from Judaism.
I think it's a big part of
Let's,
that. I think, and
it
also
could be.
distrust the government. Like I think at the end of the
Mhm,
day, if we ever find a way to trace back all of the anti-American stuff, I think we'll find out it's from places like Russia and China. Let me give
mm,
an example. I'll have students that ask me, they'll tell me, I don't think we went to the moon. There's no way. And they'll give me
right.
the standard
Right.
stories. That's Russian propaganda. Who's the one country in the 1960s and 70s who has a vested interest in proving we didn't go to the moon? They couldn't do it, so they're not going to let us do it. If we had filmed that in a Hollywood, they had pictures from the KGB of us filming that in Hollywood, they would have
Mhm,
blown that story up if it
right.
wasn't real. And so, yeah, you're getting other countries trying to take away great things we did. And the aliens, I think you'll find out that's part of it is you should distrust your government. They don't have scientists working really hard in Area 51. Humans
Hmm.
aren't very smart. They've got an
Right.
alien in there they're trying to learn from. And so
Right.
I think there's also this anti-American thing, and then it gets mixed in with
Mm.
occultic thing studies because the aliens
Hmm.
also, even when they are just physical beings, they're not demons, they always have occultic properties. Like they can talk to you just through their
Telepathy.
mind,
100%. Yeah.
and they can move things with their hands. And
Yep.
so it also has this interest of like magic and the occult and talking
100%.
to
It's not
other
clean when you go to
creatures.
look into it. You're like, what's this alien lore about? Oh, it's just
Yeah.
all.
Yes, this is New Age movement. So that's the thing is it as like a religious studies scientist, so to speak,
Hmm.
if this had arisen independent of the New Age movement, you'd say, okay, they're not the same. But it just developed in the United States at the exact same time as the New Age movement, which is teaching this kind of telepathy, special powers, ancient aliens from up
Hmm.
there. So it's
Hmm.
one of, I just put it in the category of one of the American religious cults. We've had a number of
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
This is one of them. And it's intriguing because people want to think that it could be aliens and they've watched Star Trek for so long. But yeah, none of those things, none of the technology on Star Trek is possible. It would be constantly being destroyed by space debris. You can't
Hmm.
fly between planets. I
Hmm.
was looking at a video the other day about the numbers of stormtroopers needed to keep the Empire going in Star Wars. And it's like in the hundreds of billions. Like what would
Hmm.
it take to actually conquer a planet? And according to Star Wars lore, they own like 10,000 planets. And that means at any time, any number of those planets are in rebellion. Where are they getting all these stormtroopers from? We
Right.
know that those are just humans, also not like some special robot. Where are they getting them all from? So we let a
Right.
lot of stuff go in fantasy movies. I mean, science fiction. We don't think about the details, and that's fine because we're not there to do that. But once we start saying, "But wait, let's make this real life," then we got to pay attention to the details and say, "No, this doesn't actually work that way."
Yeah. Well, the latest I've read and heard about the moon landing debate, which is amazing, is the general consensus I've seen as of late is yes, we went, but the video footage was that we all know was produced in a studio as a backup plan, and the original footage was destroyed
Mhm.
unbelievably, and so we
I know
that's what
that's
we
true.
put
To
it.
my, I mean, yeah, everyone, we all
And
agree that footage was destroyed. How could you destroy any footage?
right, and they say the Russians actually confirm that we went
Yeah,
with
they
somehow.
have.
So you know,
No, I know that's the thing
that-
is, and back when there was QAnon, they were big on this. We didn't go to the moon thing, but also big on Trump. And during his first term, Trump said we're going to go back to the moon. He
mhm.
didn't say we're going to go there for the first time. He said we're going to go back to the moon. So yeah, what I tell my students and what I tell other people is, hey, the younger generation, they got brought up either through 9/11 if they're a little bit older or through COVID. And they want to question every narrative. Fine, you should
Right.
do that. Learn to question every narrative. I have no problem with that. If you
Hmm.
want to debate if the earth is flat or not, okay. But what I want you to do as a professor is learn to find the answers.
Right.
People have
Well,
studied the shape of the earth for thousands of years, and they learned through geometry and astronomy without going off the earth and looking back. They learned how to determine that it's a sphere. Learn their arguments then and figure them out. That's fine.
what a perfect way for us to end this conversation because that's what I need to do. At a certain point, forgive me for the crass expression, but I need to stop mentally masturbating, and I need to dedicate. And so, part of getting rid of the searching for political identity name was about owning my support for Trump. And I do, and I have.
Mhm.
But I have to do more than that. I have to actually make my dad proud, which would not necessarily to be vote one way or another,
Yeah.
but to really become educated and
Yeah.
and have high degree of agency. And
Mhm.
a professor to hear that from a professor is really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's if that's a takeaway for all the young people. I encourage them and say
Yes.
that's where modern philosophy started with Descartes. He's the guy who said, "I think, therefore I am." But he started
Right.
off by saying, "I'm going to question everything. I'm going to doubt God
Yes.
exists. I'm going to even doubt I exist."
Right.
And so that's a healthy thing. I'm all for that.
That's what this show is about, and that's what I want it to continue to be about. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
um, reminding me of that. Yeah,
yeah. I'm glad we could talk today. It's a lot of fun.
yeah, really appreciate it. I hope to do it again sometime.
Mhm. Yep.
That would be awesome. Take care, man. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.